Boys, last lesson we looked at adding and subtracting of fractions using diagrams. Today we're going to continue building on that and also include what happens when we not just add and subtract proper fractions, but we also add and subtract mixed numerals. Okay, so adding and subtracting of proper fractions to get a proper fractions. This is a review of last lesson. So in A here, you notice that the denominators are different. So we're going to make them into equivalent fractions so that we can add them together, as in equivalent in the sense of they both have the same denominator. So 2/3 can become 4 out of 6, and so it's going to be 4 out of 6 plus 1 out of 6. So our total is going to be 5 out of 6. Okay, so moving down to B, this time subtraction. 2/3 minus 1 over 6. Well, 2/3 we already discovered from last time's 4 over 6. So it's essentially going to be 4 over 6 minus 1 over 6, which is 4 minus 1, which is 3 out of 6. That's how much of a whole we have. And we can simplify that down to 1 out of 2. So whenever you're doing adding and subtracting fractions, you always want to check. So like we need to do it this line, can I simplify any further? In this case we could. Alright, looking at C, 3 out of 8 plus 1 out of 5. So 3 out of 8, that's the same thing as, well, before I can really jump to a conclusion, I've got to think about what's the lowest common multiple of these two. Well, thinking ahead, 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 5, 10, 15, 20, haven't got any overlaps yet, 25, 30, 35, 40, that's going to be it. 8 times 5 is 40, so we need to change, if we're going to change the bottom to be 40, then the top we've got to times by 5, so that's going to be 15 out of 40, plus 1/5, and we're changing that to 40 and we're timesing the bottom by 8, we've got to times the top by 8, so it's going to be 8 out of 40. So on the numerator it's going to be 15 plus 8 out of 40, so that's going to be 23 out of 40, and we can't simplify that anymore. Alright, looking at D, this time we're going to subtract them. So 3/8 minus 1/5, so it's going to be 15 out of 40 minus 8 out of 40, so the same numbers as the last question. So we can do the same change, except we've got a minus in between them. So now, because they've both got the same denominator, we just need to subtract the numerators. So it's going to be 15 minus 8 out of 40. Whatever that is, well, it's going to be 7 out of 40. Again, I can't simplify. Alright, let's have a look at the right-hand column, and we're now going to deal with adding and subtracting fractions to obtain a mixed numeral. Okay, so a half plus 3 out of 5. So a half plus 3 out of 5. You can see I've already got a denominator of 10 in the first step of the working, so we're going to change these to numbers out of 10. So a half, that's 5 out of 10. And 3/5, that's going to be 6 out of 10, which is double the top and the bottom. So I'm going to have 11 out of 10. So you notice now with this answer that our numerator is bigger than our denominator. And so we can rewrite this as a mixed numeral, 1 and 1/10. Let's try another one. 23 over 6 minus a quarter. Okay, so we're going to change the denominators to be the same because you notice they're different. So a number that both 6 and 4 are going to go into. The lowest one I can think of is 12. So let's change them to being out of 12. So to get from 6 to 12, I just got to double it. What I need to multiply by, so I just double the top. So it's going to be 46 out of 6, and then minus 1/4. So 1/4 is 3 out of 12. So now I just subtract the numerators. So 46 minus 3. Oh, that should be 12 out of 12. So that's going to be 43 over 12. And if I wanted to leave that as a mixed numeral, then that's going to be equal to, I'd normally write it down the bottom, but just because it's out of space, I'm just going to put it up there. And that's going to be 3, because that takes us up to 36. 3 times 12. What's left over? 36, another 7, and 7 out of 12. Okay, so you see these skills that came in earlier in the topic are now coming to use here. All right, let's do one more of those. So 17 out of 20 plus 2/5. Now we're going to change those to be the same. Now I know 5 goes into 20, so if I just change the second one, I can just leave the first one as it is. So 17 out of 20 plus 2/5 of 20. Well, 5 times 4 gives me 20. 2 times 4 gives me 8. So it'll be 8 out of 20. So we're always just changing stuff to equivalent fractions. So 8 out of 20 is the same thing as 2 over 5. Same value. Now the denominators are the same. We plus them together. So we get 25 out of 20. Which I can simplify down. So before I put it into a mixed numeral, simplify it down, I can see 5 goes into both the top and the bottom. So that's the same thing as 5 over 4, which is 1 1/4. Alrighty. Okay, let's look at some different questions now. We're adding and subtracting mixed numerals. Alright, so adding and subtracting mixed numerals. If we simplify this one, one method is to change them into improper fractions and then add them together like we did before. So 2.5, what's that as an improper fraction? 5 over 2. 4 3/5, that's the same thing as 23 over 5. So I do 4 times 5 plus 3, gives me the numerator there. And now I just add them together, so it's going to be, oh no, we've got to change them so they're the same. The bottom is 10. So that's going to be 10 out of, so 25 over 10 for the first one. And the second one's going to be 46. And so we get a grand total of 71 out of 10, which as a mixed numeral would give me 7 1/10. Alright, let's look at a different way of doing that same question. So I just did it using what's called the improper fraction method. This is the whole then parts method. So adding these together, we get, instead of making them in improper fractions, I just separate out the fraction bits and also the whole and other bits. So this question here is the same thing as saying, well, I've got 2 wholes in the first part, another 4 wholes, and then I've got a half and 3/5. So 2 plus 4 gives me 6 wholes at the moment, and then the second part, I've got a half, which is 5 out of 10, and 3/5 is 6 out of 10. So I've now got 6 plus 11 out of 10, which is the same thing as 6 plus 1 and 1/10, which we can now combine to get 7 and 1/10, which is the same answer as we had before, just with a different method. So whichever one you're more comfortable with, you can adopt. Let's look at a subtraction question now. 4.5 minus 2 3/5. So the improper fractions method means we're going to change them to improper fractions. So 4.5 is the same thing as 9/2. 2 3/5 is the same thing as 13/5. We need to now make the denominators the same. So times the first fraction by 5 on the top and bottom gives us 45/10. And the second one is going to doubling the top and the bottom, 26/10. I now subtract them, so I get 45 minus 26/10, which gives me 20. That gives me 19 out of 10, which is 1 and 9 out of 10. All right, let's do that once more, that question. Okay, wholes and parts. So we're going to do 4 minus 2, and also we've got so in this question actually we've got 4 plus a half minus 2 wholes and also minus 3/5. So we've got 4 minus 2, which gives us 2 wholes, and then we've got also a half minus 3/5. So if we do that second bit now, a half is the same thing as 5/10. That's minus 6/10. If we change 3/5 to 6/10. So then we've got 2, do that. We've got, that ends up being minus 1/10. And so 2 minus 1/10, well, if I take 1/10 off a whole, I get 9 out of 10. So it's going to be 1 and 9 out of 10. All right, just quickly subtracting a fraction from a whole number. So quickly here, 5 minus 2/3. Well, 5 is the same thing as 15 over. Oh, so if we change them both to a denominator of 15, 5 is going to be 75, and 2/3 is going to be 10. So it's going to give us 65 out of 15, which gives us 4 and 3 out of 15, and 5 out of 15, which is 1/3. Okay, slightly different method. Think about 5 as being 4 plus 1 minus 2/3. And so 1 minus 2/3 is just 1/3. So it's going to be 4 1/3. So quickly this one. So 8 minus 2 3/5